Spring Redwood Creek, Pennsylvania, was one of those American towns that look idyllic on postcards and in advertising brochures. Neat houses with small, well-kept lawns, a public park with a pond in the center of town, an old water tower visible from anywhere, and the only high school around which the entire life of the population seemed to revolve. The Weiner house on Maple Street stood out among similar buildings with its blooming garden, the pride of Martha Weiner. At 39, she was a mother of 4, a successful makeup artist, and the center of attention in any company. Looking younger than her age, with well-groomed blonde hair, always perfectly made up and dressed in the latest fashion, Martha seemed the embodiment of a successful woman who skillfully balanced her career and family. That evening, as always on Thursdays, the Weiners had a family dinner. Martha set the table, glancing at her watch from time to time. Christina, her eldest daughter, was late. "Where is she again?" Robert grumbled as he appeared in the kitchen. A tall man with graying temples and perpetually tired eyes, he was an engineer at a local factory. The marriage, which had begun 18 years ago with Martha's unexpected pregnancy, had long since become a habit. "With Jason? Where else?" Martha said, trying to hide the irritation in her voice. "They're picking out a suit for prom." "For the 3rd time this week." Robert shook his head. "She's completely stopped helping around the house. Don't you think they're rushing into this engagement too quickly?" Martha slammed the closet door a little harder than necessary. "You're exaggerating. They've known each other for 2 years." "She's only 18, Robert objected. "She has college ahead of her, her whole life. I'd feel better if they waited." "And I'd feel better if you participated more in family life instead of just criticizing," Martha retorted. The front door slammed, interrupting the beginning argument. Christina rushed into the kitchen, a tall, energetic girl who had inherited her mother's blonde hair and lively eyes. "Sorry I'm late." Christina put several bags on the table. "You won't believe it, but we found the perfect suit for Jason. It's dark blue, just like my dress." "We?" Robert raised an eyebrow. "Are you your boyfriend's stylist now?" "Dad, he's my fiancé." Christina showed off her small diamond ring. "And anyway, I have great taste. Mom, tell him." Martha smiled, but her gaze clouded over for a moment. "Of course, dear. After all, you grew up watching me work." Martha was truly proud of her career. Starting as a regular makeup artist in a small salon, she eventually built up her own clientele and reputation. Now she worked at the best salon in town and sometimes traveled to neighboring cities for special events. Speaking of work, Christina perked up even more. Jason found a part-time job at a lab in Pittsburgh. It's related to his future major. He'll be going there on weekends. "Another reason to see each other less often," Robert grumbled. "Dad, we'll literally be living together soon." Christina rolled her eyes. "You know I got a scholarship to the same university as him." The twins, Alex and Emma, 10-year-old copies of their parents, ran into the room, breaking the tension of the conversation. "Mom, Ethan won't let us watch our cartoon." "Ethan!" Martha shouted. "Go to dinner and let the twins watch their show." 13-year-old Ethan, the middle son, appeared in the doorway, headphones around his neck and a discontented expression on his face. "I was doing my homework, actually." "No arguing at dinner," Martha said firmly. "Everyone sit down and tell us about your day." The family dinner continued as usual. The twins interrupted each other as they talked about school. Ethan silently picked at his plate. Robert asked questions without really listening to the answers, and Christina kept glancing at her phone, smiling at messages from Jason. Martha watched this scene with a strange feeling of detachment. 18 years ago, she had gotten pregnant by Robert when she was only 21. At the time, he seemed like the perfect man to her, older, more serious, with a promising career. They got married quickly, and she gave up her dream of leaving Redwood Creek for the big city. Then Ethan and the twins came along. Life became routine, and Robert became increasingly immersed in his work. "Jason is coming tomorrow to help with a project for the science fair." Christina's voice brought Martha back to reality. "You don't mind, do you, Mom?" "Of course not," Martha smiled. trying not to betray her sudden excitement. "I'll be home. It's my day off." "I'll be working late," Robert said. "Supply problems again." As usual, Martha couldn't help her sarcasm. Robert chose to ignore the remark. After dinner, when the children had gone to their rooms, Martha washed the dishes, thinking about the day ahead. Jason Clark. She had first met him 2 years ago when he came to their house to take Christina to the school prom. Tall, with dark hair and a confident gaze, he had immediately impressed her. At 19, he was more mature than many of his peers, captain of the school swim team, an honors student who had earned a scholarship to a prestigious university. At first, Martha was simply happy for her daughter. Jason was exactly the kind of guy she wanted for Christina, ambitious, with prospects, unlike the local boys who planned to spend their whole lives in Redwood Creek. But gradually, she began to notice that she waited for his visits with particular excitement, tried to look especially good when he came, and hung on his every word. "Are you daydreaming?" Robert appeared in the kitchen with an empty glass. "The dishes won't wash themselves." Martha started in surprise. "I was thinking about tomorrow's client," she lied. "It's a difficult case." "All your cases are difficult." Robert poured some water and headed for the stairs. "I'll be in my office finishing up some reports." When he left, Martha finished the dishes and went upstairs. Passing Christina's room, she heard her laughing. The girl was talking on the phone, undoubtedly with Jason. Martha slowed her pace, listening. "And Mom will be home, so no problem," Christina said. "Yes, we have all the tools in the garage. Of course she won't get in the way. You're so cute when you're nervous." Martha felt her heart beat faster. She quietly went to her bedroom, closed the door, and walked over to the mirror. She examined herself critically, the fine lines around her eyes, the slight fatigue in her gaze. But she still looked attractive, much younger than her age. Clients often asked her the secret of her youth. Martha opened her closet and began sorting through her clothes, thinking about what to wear tomorrow. Her gaze fell on a new dress she had bought last month and had never worn. Lightweight, with a floral print, it flattered her figure without looking too provocative. Perfect for a day at home. In the morning, Martha got up earlier than usual. Robert had already left for work, and the children were still asleep. She took a shower, carefully applied her makeup, straightened her hair, and put on the dress she had chosen. When she went down to the kitchen to make breakfast, Christina was already there, sleepy-eyed and in her pajamas. "Mom, are you going somewhere?" she asked in surprise. "I thought you had the day off." "Just in a good mood," Martha shrugged, taking eggs out of the refrigerator. "Haven't pampered myself in a while." "You always look amazing," Christina yawned. "Not like I do now." "You're beautiful no matter what, sweetie." Martha began to cook the eggs. "What time is Jason coming?" "Around 10. Christina poured herself some juice. "We want to finish the project before evening." "I won't get in the way," Martha smiled. "I'll just do my own thing." The day dragged on slowly. Martha sent the younger children out to play with the neighbor kids and began cleaning, glancing at the clock periodically. At 5 to 10, she heard the doorbell ring and felt her pulse quicken. Christina ran to open the door. "Hi," Jason's voice reached her. "Are you ready to perform a scientific miracle?" "Only if you brought all the materials," Christina laughed. Martha gave them a few minutes, then, as if by accident, walked out of the kitchen into the hallway. "Good morning, Jason," she smiled. "How are you?" Jason turned and froze for a moment, looking at her. Martha felt satisfied with the effect she had produced. "Hello, Mrs. Weiner," he smiled back. "Fine, thank you. You look very elegant today." "Mom's in a good mood today," Christina said, not noticing the brief pause. "We'll be in the garage, okay?" "Sure," Martha nodded. "I'll make you some lemonade later." When they left, Martha went back to cleaning, but her thoughts were far away. She remembered how Jason looked at her, how he hesitated for a second. It was the kind of look men give not to their girlfriend's mother, but to a woman. An hour later, Martha made lemonade and took it to the garage. Jason and Christina were engrossed in working on some device with wires and microchips. "Break time," Martha announced, placing the tray on the work table. "You're the best, Mom," Christina said, looking up from her work and taking a glass. "Thank you, Mrs. Weiner." Jason took a glass of lemonade too. "Just what we need." "Please call me Martha," she smiled. "After all, you'll soon be part of the family." She lingered, watching them work and asking questions about the project. Jason enthusiastically explained how their device worked, and Martha couldn't help but notice how his eyes lit up when he talked about science. At moments like this, he seemed even more attractive. "Mom, have you seen the pliers?" Christina asked, interrupting her thoughts. "They should be on the top shelf." Martha pointed to the tool cabinet. "Let me take a look." She walked over to the cabinet and reached for the tool, knowing that her dress would ride up slightly as she did so. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Jason watching her and slowly turned, handing the pliers to her daughter. "Here you go." "Thanks." Christina immediately returned to her work. "I won't bother you anymore," Martha said, heading for the exit. "If you need anything, I'll be in the house." She spent the rest of the day doing household chores and periodically finding excuses to look into the garage. Every time she saw Jason, she was overcome by a strange feeling, a mixture of admiration, envy of her daughter, and something else she didn't want to name. In the evening, when Jason left and Christina went upstairs to call her friend, Martha sat in the living room, leafing through a magazine but not seeing the pages. She thought about how her life would have changed if she had met someone like Jason when she was young, or if she had met him now but under different circumstances. Martha's phone rang, pulling her out of her reverie. It was her friend and colleague, Sarah. "How was your day?" Sarah asked after saying hello. "The usual," Martha lied. "Kids, cleaning, cooking." "Poor thing," Sarah laughed. "Listen, do you want to go out tomorrow? A new bar has opened and they say the cocktails are great." Martha wanted to refuse, but then she realized that she needed someone to talk to distract herself from her unwanted thoughts. "You know, maybe I will," she sighed. "I need some fresh air." Hanging up the phone, Martha looked at the family photo on the wall. Her, Robert, and their 4 children, all smiling. The perfect family. The life she had chosen for herself. But then why did she feel so confined within these boundaries? And why, every time she closed her eyes, did she see Jason's face? The Moonlight Bar turned out to be just the place Martha needed that evening. Dim lighting, soft music, and cocktails with names that promised temporary oblivion. "Here's to a free evening." Sarah raised her glass of bright pink cocktail. At 37, she was divorced, childless, and seemed to be enjoying a life that Martha could only dream of. "To freedom," Martha echoed, taking a sip. The alcohol burned her throat, but the sensation was pleasant. "Sometimes I forget what it's like to be just a woman, not a mother or a wife." Sarah nodded understandingly. "Because Robert has long seen you only as the mother of his children?" Martha sighed, twirling the glass in her hands. "You know, when we met, he was so confident. He seemed older than his years. I thought he would give me stability, help me find my place in life. Instead, you're stuck in Redwood Creek," Sarah finished for her. "Doing makeup for local ladies who want to look 10 years younger for their husbands, who are just as boring as they are. It's not all that bad," Martha protested weakly, although she agreed with every word. "I have good kids, and I enjoy my work." "But?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I hear that but in your voice." Martha took another sip of her cocktail, feeling the alcohol loosen her tongue. "Sometimes I look at Christina and think, God, I was so young when I got pregnant with her. My whole life ahead of me, so many paths to choose from. And then, just like that, it was over. The choice was made. Forever." "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked directly. Martha stared into her glass for a long time before answering. "No, not about the children. Never about them. But sometimes I imagine what my life could have been like if I had lived for myself first." If I had met another man. If I had moved to the big city as I dreamed of doing. Or if you met someone now who made you feel alive again. Sarah looked closely at her friend. You seemed strange on the phone yesterday. Did something happen? Martha felt the color rush to her cheeks. She couldn't even tell Sarah about her thoughts of Jason. It was too wrong. He was the same age as her daughter, almost a member of the family. I'm just tired, she lied. Robert is working late again, and I have to do everything at home. Men, Sarah snorted. Okay, let's not talk about sad things. Tell me how Christina is doing instead. Are she and her boyfriend still planning to get married after college? Martha tensed at the question about Jason. Yes, Jason is a good boy, smart, determined, not like the local boys. I'm happy for her, really. But? Sarah sensed something unsaid again. But she's only 18, Martha repeated Robert's words. Sometimes I think they're rushing into it. They should wait, live a little, see the world. Not everyone makes the mistakes of youth, Sarah said softly, then immediately bit her tongue. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's okay. Martha smiled tensely. I don't think Christina is a mistake, but I would feel better if she didn't follow in my footsteps. If she got an education first, worked for a while, and then thought about starting a family. They changed the subject, but Martha's thoughts kept returning to Jason, to the way he had looked at her yesterday in the garage. At her age, such thoughts were foolish. She knew that. But they gave her something she had been missing for a long time. The feeling that she was still a woman capable of attracting attention, not just a mother and wife. When Martha returned home, Robert was already asleep. She slipped quietly into the bathroom, washed off her makeup, and stared at her reflection in the mirror for a long time. Despite her fatigue and the first signs of age, she was still an attractive woman. But when was the last time Robert had told her that? When had he looked at her with the same desire he had when they were young? The next morning, Martha woke up with a slight headache and a feeling of guilt over her thoughts from the night before. She made breakfast for the family, got the children ready for school, and went to the salon. The day dragged on slowly. The clients, who usually interested Martha with their stories, seemed empty and uninteresting today. Their problems, what shade of lipstick to choose for a party, or how to hide wrinkles on their foreheads, suddenly seemed so insignificant to her. You seem distracted today, salon owner Diana remarked when Martha asked a client a question for the third time. Is everything okay? Yes, I just didn't get enough sleep, Martha smiled tensely. Kids, you know how it is. Diana nodded, though her eyes betrayed her doubt. On her way home, Martha decided to stop by the supermarket. She wanted to cook something special for dinner, hoping it might dispel her oppressive feeling of dissatisfaction. Pushing her cart between the aisles, she suddenly saw a familiar figure. Jason was standing by the canned goods shelf, studying the labels. Martha's heart beat faster, and she froze for a moment, not knowing whether to approach him or pretend she hadn't noticed him. But at that moment, Jason turned around and saw her. Mrs. Way Martha, he smiled, pausing slightly. Good afternoon. Hello, Jason. She moved closer. Are you shopping? Yes, my mother asked me to buy something for dinner. He showed her the list on his phone. But I can't find this sauce. I've never bought it before. Let me see. Martha leaned closer, bending over his phone screen. She caught a faint whiff of his cologne. Oh, I know it. It's not here. It's in the Asian food section. Come on, I'll show you. They walked together, and Martha felt a strange pleasure in this simple shared activity. How's your project with Christina going? She asked to keep the conversation going. Almost done, Jason perked up. All that's left is to program the interface. Christina is a big help. She's good at design. She's always been creative, Martha smiled. And you, I see, are more of a techie? Yes, I like working with mechanisms, understanding how everything works. His eyes lit up as he began to explain his interest in engineering. Martha listened, thinking about how long it had been since Robert had spoken with such enthusiasm about anything. Here it is. She pointed to the sauce she wanted. "Does your mom cook anything special?" "Just dinner," he shrugged. "She works as a nurse, often gets tired, but always tries to cook homemade meals." "That's important for the family," Martha nodded. "You know, I always try too." She suddenly stopped, noticing Carol Jenkins, one of her clients and a well-known gossip, at the end of the aisle. "I think it's time for us to go. Say hi to your mom." Jason looked a little puzzled by the sudden change in tone, but nodded. "Sure, thanks for your help." Martha quickly said goodbye and headed for the checkout, feeling Carol's curious gaze on her. In small towns, any little thing could become a topic of gossip, and talking to her daughter's boyfriend in the supermarket was not something she wanted to hear people talking about. A surprise awaited her at home. Robert had returned earlier than usual and had even started cooking dinner. This was so uncharacteristic of him that Martha immediately sensed something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, unpacking the groceries. "Nothing," Robert said awkwardly, stirring something in a pot. "I just decided to do something nice for you. You've been kind of distant lately." Martha froze. Were her feelings really that obvious? "I'm just tired," she said, trying to smile. "I'm glad you noticed." "Of course I notice." Robert approached and awkwardly hugged her from behind. "You're my wife." Martha tensed at this touch, which had once been so familiar. When had everything changed? When had they become mere functions to each other? She cooks and cleans, he earns money. "Where are the kids?" she asked, gently freeing herself from his embrace. "The twins are at a friend's house. Ethan is at practice, and Christina." He hesitated. "What about Christina?" Martha tensed. "She had a fight with Jason," Robert said reluctantly. "She locked herself in her room and is crying. I tried to talk to her, but you know she won't listen to me." Martha felt a strange mixture of anxiety and hope. No, that wasn't right. "I'll go up to her," she said, heading for the stairs. Christina was indeed crying, her face buried in her pillow. When she saw her mother, she tried to wipe away her tears. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Martha sat down next to her, stroking her daughter's head. "Jason said he wants to take a break," Christina sobbed. "That we need time to think before college. That we're too young for such commitments." Martha froze. It was almost a verbatim repeat of what she had said to Sarah yesterday. "Maybe he's just nervous about big changes," she said cautiously. "College, a new city, a new life, it's scary." "But we have to be together," Christina protested. "I love him, Mom. And he said he loved me. And now he's suddenly changed his mind? That's not how it works." "It happens, sweetie," Martha sighed. "People change, feelings change. Maybe you really should take a break from each other. Focus on your studies, on new experiences." Christina looked at her mother with resentment. "Are you on his side? I thought you understood how important it is for me to be with him." "I'm on your side always," Martha hugged her daughter. "I just don't want you to suffer if he's really not sure about his feelings." After a long conversation, Christina finally calmed down and even agreed to come down for dinner. But Martha couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Why had Jason suddenly decided to take a break from their relationship? It couldn't possibly have anything to do with how she had spoken to him at the supermarket, could it? The next day, Martha decided to stop by the Clark's house on the pretext of picking up a textbook that Jason had lent Christina. In reality, she needed to see him, to understand what was going on. The door was opened by Helen Clark, Jason's mother, a tired woman with kind eyes. "Martha, is something wrong?" She looked surprised. No, Christine just needs the textbook Jason lent her." Martha tried to sound casual. "She's at extra classes. She asked me to come by." "Of course, come in." Helen let her into the house. "Jason is in his room. Jason," she called. "Mrs. Weiner is here to see you." Jason appeared on the stairs and froze for a moment when he saw Martha. Was that fear she saw in his eyes? "Hello," he said, slowly descending the stairs. "Is something wrong?" Christina needs a physics textbook, Martha explained. You lent her yours, didn't you? Yes, of course. He nodded, but didn't move. I'll go get it. Would you like some tea, Martha? Helen offered. I'm on my break between shifts. I'd love some, Martha smiled. When Helen went into the kitchen, Martha whispered to Jason, Christina is very upset. What's going on? Jason lowered his eyes. I just thought we should take a break from each other before college. It's a big step, and I want to be sure. You seemed pretty sure yesterday at the supermarket, Martha remarked. Yesterday at the supermarket we were talking about sauce. Jason looked up, and Martha saw a mixture of confusion and wariness in his eyes. Listen, Mrs. Weiner, Martha, I just want to be honest with Christina. If I have doubts, it's better to talk about them now than later, when it will hurt more. Of course, Martha took a step back. I'm just worried about my daughter. I'm worried about her too, Jason said quietly. That's why I want to be sure before I promise her anything serious. Martha suddenly realized she was standing too close to him and took another step back. When Jason left, Martha leaned against the wall, feeling her heart beating wildly. What was she doing? What was she thinking? This was crazy. He was practically a child, her future son-in-law, the man she should want to be happy with her daughter. A week had passed since Jason announced he was taking a break from his relationship with Christina. The Weiner's house was filled with heavy tension. Christina hardly left her room, refused to eat, and ignored her parents' attempts to talk to her. Robert blamed Jason for everything. Martha was caught between two fires, sincerely worried about her daughter. She couldn't stop thinking about Jason. On Saturday morning, Martha's phone rang. The number was unknown. Hello? She answered cautiously. Martha, it's Jason. Sorry to bother you, but I need to talk to you. Alone. Martha's heart skipped a beat. Of course. When? Today? At the park by the pond at noon? Okay, I'll be there. At noon, Martha sat on a bench by the pond, nervously fiddling with the strap of her bag. She had touched up her makeup twice before leaving and put on one of her best dresses. Jason arrived right on time. He looked troubled and sat down on the opposite end of the bench, keeping his distance. Thank you for coming. I didn't know who else to talk to about this. About what, Jason? He took a deep breath. About what's going on between us. Or what I think you think is going on. Martha felt the blood rush to her face. I don't understand what you're talking about. Listen, I've noticed the way you look at me, the way you act around me, and your visit last week. I have to be honest. I love Christina. Yes, I have doubts about our engagement, but only because we're both very young. But that doesn't mean that between us, he pointed at Martha and himself, there could be something. Never. Martha felt the ground slip away from under her feet. Her secret thoughts, her fantasies. It was all so obvious that even this boy had noticed. Shame and humiliation flooded her. You've got it all wrong. I was just worried about my daughter. I wanted to understand why you changed your mind. Really? Because sometimes it seems like that I'm flirting with my daughter's boyfriend? Martha stood up abruptly. Are you serious? I'm 39 years old, a mother of 4, and you're just an arrogant boy who thinks he's irresistible. Jason also stood up, his face expressing confusion. I didn't mean to offend you. If I was wrong, I sincerely apologize. Wrong is not the word. I hoped you were a worthy man for my daughter, but now I see that I was wrong. Don't call me anymore. She quickly walked away, feeling tears burning her eyes. Humiliation, anger, and awareness of her own guilt all mixed together into a toxic cocktail of emotions. Getting into the car, she gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. What had she done? How had she allowed these thoughts to go so far? She should be thinking about Christina, about her family, but instead, she was fantasizing about a boy 20 years her junior. That evening, Christina appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes were red from crying, but her expression had changed. Now it showed determination. Mom, Do you have a minute? Of course, sweetie. What's wrong? Jason called. Christina smiled weakly. He said he was wrong about taking a break. He said he loves me and wants us to stay together. He's coming to prom like we planned. Martha felt something cold curl in her stomach. That's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. He sounded strange, Christina continued, frowning. He said he wanted to make sure our family was still happy to have him. It's like something happened. Do you know what he's talking about? Martha turned away toward the sink, pretending to wash her hands. I have no idea. Maybe he's just worried that Dad is angry with him. Christina seemed satisfied with this explanation. Exactly. Dad was so angry. Will you help me convince him that Jason isn't to blame? Of course. Everything will be fine. But nothing was fine. Something inside Martha had broken after the conversation in the park. The humiliation and rejection awakened a dark, malicious feeling in her. How dare he reject her? How dare he make her look like a pathetic, preoccupied, middle-aged woman? The next 2 weeks were spent in feverish preparation for the prom. Christina was beaming with happiness, and Robert had thawed a little after his daughter's reconciliation with Jason. No one noticed that something was wrong with Martha. In the evenings, when everyone was asleep, she sat at the computer, browsing strange websites. At first, she looked for information on how to forget an inappropriate crush and how to cope with a midlife crisis. But gradually, her searches became darker. How to get revenge on someone, poisonous plants of Pennsylvania, undefined toxins. Martha's search history became increasingly disturbing. About a week before graduation, Martha drove to the neighboring town of Greenfield under the pretext of a special order for a client. In fact, she headed to a small gardening supply store on the outskirts of town. The elderly salesman smiled warmly at her. How can I help you, ma'am? I need something to get rid of rodents. We have mice in the attic, and my youngest daughter is allergic to cats. Of course, we have several options: traps, ultrasonic repellents, or poisons. Which would you prefer? Poisons, I think. Something effective but safe for children. In that case, I recommend this, the man said, pulling out a small box. It's a new generation of rat poison. It works quickly, but it comes in containers that children can't open. The main thing is to place them in inaccessible places. Martha took the box, feeling her hands tremble. Does it kill quickly? Quite quickly, nodded the salesman. The drug disrupts blood clotting. Rodents die from internal bleeding, usually within a day. And it can't be detected? Martha immediately corrected herself when she saw the salesman's surprised look. I mean, there's no smell or traces that could attract the attention of children? No, the drug is virtually odorless, the man replied slowly, looking at her intently. But I would still recommend keeping it away from children. Of course, I'll take 2 packs, just in case. When she got home, she hid her purchase in her closet, behind boxes of winter clothes. Even touching the poison was scary, but the thought of Jason and Christina being happy together after he had humiliated her was unbearable. The prom was scheduled for Saturday, just 4 days away. Christina flitted around the house, discussing the final details of her outfit. Jason didn't show up. He avoided coming to their house, citing exam preparation. On Thursday evening, while Martha was cleaning Christina's room, she noticed a card on the table. In Jason's neat handwriting, it read, Christina, I'm counting down the days until our prom. It will be a special evening. I love you and always will. Forever yours, Jason. Martha clutched the card so tightly that the paper crumpled in her hand. Forever yours? After everything that had happened, he had the nerve to write that? It could have been her, Martha. If only they had met earlier. If she hadn't been stuck in this life. Christina appeared in the doorway. Mom, what are you doing with my card? Martha flinched and opened her hand. I'm sorry, sweetie. I was just reading it. Jason is so romantic. Yes, Christina beamed, taking the crumpled card. He's special. I'm so happy we're back together. And you know, Mom, she hesitated. I think he's the one. You know? The the one I want to spend the rest of my life with. Martha felt something break inside her. You're so young. You have your whole life ahead of you. Like you did when you met Dad? Christina smiled. You were sure too, weren't you? Martha didn't know how to respond. She wanted to shout, "No, I wasn't sure. I just got pregnant and found myself trapped." But instead, she simply hugged her daughter and whispered. That night, Martha couldn't sleep. Thoughts swirled in her head, dark and dangerous. She got out of bed, trying not to wake Robert, and tiptoed to the closet. She took out a box of rat poison and stared at it for a long time in the moonlight streaming through the window. If only that boy hadn't come into their lives. If only he hadn't rejected her so humiliatingly. If only Christina hadn't been so blinded by love. The prom was scheduled for 7 o'clock on Saturday evening. Martha was supposed to help several graduates with their makeup, including Christina. Jason promised to pick her up at 6. On Friday evening, Martha went up to her daughter's room. Christina was sitting at the table, finishing her preparations for prom. Honey, would you like me to make something special for you and Jason tomorrow? Maybe a thermos of punch? Or sandwiches? There will be food at the prom, but you know how school food is. Christina smiled. That would be great, Mom. Jason loves your cranberry punch. I remember. I'll make some especially for him. Back in her room, Martha opened the closet and took out the box of poison. In the bright light of the lamp, the small granules in the plastic container looked almost harmless. She closed her eyes, imagining Jason drinking punch at the prom, dancing with Christina, planning their future, a future that she, Martha, would never have. A future he had taken away from her with his arrogant refusal. The decision came suddenly, like the flick of a switch. Martha hid the poison back in the cupboard and went to bed. Tomorrow was a big day, the day she would regain control of her life. On Saturday morning, Martha got up before everyone else and went down to the kitchen. The house was silent, only the ticking of the clock breaking the silence. She took cranberries, oranges, and ingredients for her famous punch out of the refrigerator. It was a recipe that had been praised at all school events. As she worked, she thought about her life, about lost opportunities, about how things could have turned out differently. She thought about Christine, about her hopes and dreams, about Jason, who dared to reject her, Martha, as if she were a nobody. When the punch was almost ready, Martha went upstairs and took a box of poison out of her hiding place. Her hands were no longer shaking. Graduation day was clear and warm, as if nature itself had decided to give the Redwood Creek graduates a perfect farewell day. The Weiner's house was filled with festive excitement. Christina had been restless since morning, checking her dress, shoes, jewelry, and reviewing her list of things to take with her over and over again. Mom, have you seen my purse? The small silver one? Christina rushed into the kitchen where Martha was finishing cooking lunch. It's on your nightstand, dear. I saw it when I was taking the laundry upstairs, Martha replied without turning away from the stove. In front of her stood a thermos of cranberry punch, already closed and ready for the evening. You're the best! Christina kissed her mother on the cheek and rushed back upstairs. Martha slowly ran her hand over the thermos. Simple, black, unremarkable. It contained a special recipe prepared especially for tonight. At 5 o'clock, the parade of hairdressers and makeup artists began. Martha, like a pro, took charge of her daughter's makeup. Her hands worked confidently, despite her inner trembling. Close your eyes, she commanded softly as she applied the eyeshadow. Today, you will be the most beautiful. Do you think Jason will like it? Christina sat with her eyes closed, a happy smile on her face. He'll be enchanted, Martha replied, thinking that no one else would see her daughter's eyes shining with happiness. At the beginning of the 6th, Robert arrived, having returned early from work, especially to see his daughter before her prom. My princess, he said, when Christina came down to the living room in the long blue dress they had chosen together with Martha a month ago. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Jason, dressed in an elegant dark blue suit, stood on the doorstep with a corsage in a small box. When he saw Martha, he froze for a moment, but quickly regained his composure and smiled politely. "Good evening, Mrs. Weiner." "Hello, Jason." Martha smiled as warmly as she could. "Come in. Christina is almost ready." When Christina came down the stairs, Jason's eyes widened with admiration. "You look stunning," he breathed. Robert cleared his throat, standing nearby. "Stay with her all evening, and bring her home by midnight." "Of course, sir," Jason nodded. Martha watched the scene with strange calm. She was holding a bag with a thermos. "I made you some punch," she said. "I know there will be drinks at the prom, but you've always loved my cranberry punch, right, Jason?" The young man glanced at her nervously, but nodded. "Yes, it's very tasty. Thank you." "Mommy took care of us," Christina smiled, taking the bag. "We'll definitely drink it when we find a quiet place to talk." Martha smiled and hugged her daughter. "Enjoy every moment, sweetheart," she whispered. After the photo shoot, the young people went to the prom. Robert returned to the younger children, and Martha sank into a chair, feeling a strange emptiness inside. The deed was done. Now all that remained was to wait. The Radwood Creek High School gym was decorated with a nautical theme: Ocean of Opportunities. Blue and silver balloons, shiny garlands imitating waves, even a small fountain in the center of the hall. The parent committee had done a great job. Christina and Jason joined their friends. The evening was filled with laughter, dancing, and photos. They left the thermos of punch on one of the tables, intending to drink it later. Around 9 o'clock, when the party was in full swing, Christina suggested that Jason go out to the school garden. They took the thermos and 2 cups and slipped out of the hall unnoticed. The school garden was a quiet refuge, hidden from view. Several stone benches, rose bushes, and a small fountain made it a romantic and secluded spot. "Here's to us," Christina raised her cup of punch. "Here's to our future," Jason smiled, clinking glasses with her. They drank, talking about the upcoming summer, college, and everything that lay ahead. Half an hour later, Christina felt strange. At first, it was just weakness, but soon nausea and dizziness set in. "Jay, I don't feel well," she muttered. "What's wrong?" Jason leaned toward her, concerned. "You look pale." "I don't know. I feel dizzy and nauseous." Jason helped her up, but Christina staggered and almost fell. Even more concerned, he put his arm around her waist and led her back to the school. But before they reached the door, Christina coughed and blood appeared on her lips. "Oh my God!" Jason exclaimed. "We need help! Hang in there, Chris. I'll call an ambulance." But it was too late. Christina was losing consciousness in his arms. Her breathing was becoming more and more irregular, and blood was also beginning to ooze from her nose. Jason's cries attracted the attention of the security guard and several teachers. Someone called an ambulance, someone tried to give first aid, but Christina, pale as a sheet, was no longer responding. By the time the ambulance arrived, Christina Weiner was dead. The schoolyard had turned into a crime scene. The flashing lights of police cars and ambulances illuminated the faces of shocked graduates and teachers. Jason, in shock and with a blood-stained shirt, was kept apart for questioning. Martha received a call at 10:23 p.m. An official voice informed her that her daughter had been hospitalized in critical condition. When she and Robert arrived at the hospital, a police officer was already waiting for them at the entrance to the emergency room. "Mr. and Mrs. Weiner, I'm very sorry, but your daughter did not survive." The world around Martha seemed to slow down. She saw Robert's face contort with grief as he shouted something at the police officer, demanding an explanation, but she couldn't hear a sound. There was only one thought in her head. "I did this. I killed my daughter." But outwardly, she was the picture of maternal grief, sobbing, begging to be told it was a mistake, that her girl couldn't have died on her prom night. They were led into a small room for relatives. A few minutes later, a middle-aged woman with short dark hair and attentive eyes entered. "Mr. and Mrs. Weiner, I'm Detective Lisa Montgomery." She showed her badge. "I'm very sorry for your loss. I understand this is a terrible time, but I need to ask you a few questions." "Questions?" Robert looked up. "Our daughter is dead. What questions could there be?" "Mr. Weiner," the detective's voice was soft but firm. "The preliminary examination showed signs of poisoning. We are awaiting toxicology tests, but—" "Poisoning." Martha interrupted her, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" Detective Montgomery looked closely at Martha. "The symptoms indicate something that interferes with blood clotting. Internal bleeding, blood from the nose and mouth. We need to find out what she ate or drank before she became ill." "My God," Robert whispered. "That's impossible." "Did your daughter have a history of drug use?" the detective asked. "No!" Martha and Robert exclaimed simultaneously. "Of course not," Martha added. "Christina was a straight-A student. She didn't even drink alcohol." "What about her boyfriend? That Jason guy? He's the same." "A good boy," Martha said quietly, avoiding the detective's gaze. "They were going to college together." Detective Montgomery made a note in her notebook. "We're interviewing everyone who was at the prom. Jason said they were drinking some kind of punch that you made, Mrs. Weiner?" Martha froze. "Yes," she replied after a pause. "Cranberry punch. I make it for all the school events. Jason loves it." "And you gave them some to take with them in a thermos?" "Yes, I thought it would be a nice addition to their evening." The detective nodded, continuing to take notes. "Our experts are currently examining that thermos. Jason said he drank the punch too, but he didn't feel sick." "Maybe it was something else," Robert suggested. "Something she ate at school?" "We're considering all possibilities, but one thing in particular concerns me. Jason says they opened the thermos and poured punch into 2 cups, but then a friend approached him, and he was distracted for a moment. When he returned, Christina had already poured herself a cup and was waiting for him to toast." Martha froze, her hands clenched into fists under the table. "What are you saying?" Robert asked. "That someone could have slipped something into her drink?" "That's one possibility," the detective nodded. "Or her glass could have been contaminated with something. Or it could have been an accident. We need to wait for the test results." "Who would want to harm Christine?" Martha exclaimed, her voice trembling. "She was a wonderful girl. Everyone loved her." Detective Montgomery looked closely at Martha, something in her tone causing the detective to tilt her head slightly. "That's what we're trying to find out, Mrs. Weiner. Did Christine have any enemies? Maybe rivals? Or problems with someone at school?" Robert and Martha exchanged glances and shook their heads. "No, nothing like that," Robert replied. "She was happy, especially the last 2 weeks after she and Jason made up." "Made up?" The detective raised an eyebrow. "They had a fight?" Martha tensed, but Robert continued. "Jason wanted to take a break from their relationship before college. Christina was heartbroken, but then he changed his mind. They were going to get married after graduation." The detective made another note. "I'd like to talk to you in more detail tomorrow, when the initial shock has passed," she said, closing her notebook. "But now, you may want to see your daughter one last time." Martha and Robert followed the detective. Martha stopped in front of the morgue door. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't see her like this." "I understand," the detective nodded. "Mr. Weiner, if you want to—" Robert took a deep breath and nodded. He disappeared behind the door, leaving Martha alone with the detective. "Mrs. Weiner," Lisa Montgomery said quietly, "if you remember anything that might help, any detail, call me. Here's my card." Martha took the business card, her hand trembling. "Of course," she whispered. "I want you to find whoever did this to my girl." Detective Montgomery held her gaze on Martha's face a little longer than necessary, then nodded gently. "We'll find them, I promise." That night, returning to the house emptied of Christina, Martha sat on the edge of the bathtub, her whole body shaking. The plan had not gone as she had expected. The poison was meant for Jason, not Christina. But something had happened. Something had gone wrong, and now her daughter was dead. Suddenly, she was overcome by nausea and barely made it to the toilet. When the attack passed, Martha looked up and saw her pale, horror-stricken face in the mirror. "What have I done?" she asked her reflection silently, but there was no answer. Meanwhile, Detective Lisa Montgomery sat in her office, spreading out photos from the scene, preliminary expert reports, and notes from interviews. Her gaze kept returning to the notes about Martha Weiner's reaction. Something about this woman's behavior didn't seem quite right. This was not how mothers who had lost a daughter reacted. Something was hidden behind her grief, something that Detective Montgomery intended to uncover. The first 3 days after Christina's death passed in a blur. The Weiner home was filled with relatives, friends, neighbors, everyone who came to offer their condolences. Martha mechanically accepted hugs, thanked people for their support, and made tea for the guests. Robert withdrew into himself, hardly speaking, only occasionally leaving his study. The younger children, not fully aware of what had happened, became quiet, frightened by the atmosphere in the house. On the 4th day, when everyone had left, the doorbell rang. Martha opened the door and saw Detective Montgomery. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Weiner." Lisa was dressed in a casual suit, but her gaze remained professionally attentive. "May I come in? I have news about the investigation." Martha silently let her in. They went into the kitchen, where Martha automatically put the kettle on. "Tea?" "No, thank you." The detective put a folder on the table. "The toxicology results confirmed our suspicions. Christina died from a powerful anticoagulant, commonly used in rat poison." Martha froze at the stove, her back to the detective. "The poison was only in her glass, not in the thermos," Lisa continued. "Strange, isn't it? Someone must have added it to her portion specifically. Maybe someone at school?" Martha's voice sounded hollow. "Someone who was jealous of her." "We checked that theory." Lisa opened the folder. "We interviewed all her classmates and reviewed the surveillance cameras. No one approached their table when they left the thermos there. And when they went out into the garden, there was no one around at all." Martha finally turned around. "Then how?" "There's an interesting detail." Lisa tapped her finger on a page in the folder. "Jason mentioned that when he was distracted by a conversation with a friend, Christina was pouring the punch herself. And when he returned, he noticed that she had already taken a sip from her glass, but insisted on making a formal toast." Martha swallowed. "What does that mean?" "I don't know yet," Lisa shrugged. "But here's what really caught my attention. 2 weeks ago, a woman who looked very much like you went into a garden supply store in Greenfield. She bought rat poison, the same kind that was found in Christina's system." Martha felt her legs give way and sank into a chair. "Lots of people buy rodent poison," she muttered. "That doesn't prove anything." "Of course," Lisa nodded. "That's why we got a search warrant for your house. The team is already on its way." "A search?" Martha turned pale. "But why? I lost my daughter. My little girl. Do you think I'm—" Her voice broke. "I think I have a duty to check all possibilities." Lisa's voice became firmer. "Including the one where a mother poisons a punch intended for her daughter's boyfriend, but her daughter drinks it by mistake." Martha froze. Silence hung in the kitchen, broken only by the ticking of the clock and the whistle of the boiling kettle. "Robert told me something interesting," the detective continued, "about how strange you've been acting lately, how often you sat at the computer at night, how you were upset at first when Christina and Jason broke up, and then suddenly became irritable when they reconciled." Martha remained silent, staring at the table. "And here's what Jason told me." Lisa turned the page. "About how he noticed your special attention, how you sought out meetings with him, about the conversation in the park when he told you directly that nothing could happen between you." The sound of cars pulling up interrupted the detective's monologue. A minute later, the doorbell rang. "It's the team with the warrant." Lisa stood up. "They'll start with your bedroom. What will they find there, Mrs. Weiner?" Martha covered her face with her hands. "I didn't want to," she whispered. "I didn't want Christina to—" "You wanted to poison Jason," the detective finished for her. "But something went wrong." Martha nodded, tears streaming between her fingers. I put poison in the thermos. Her voice was barely audible. Right before I gave it to Christina. Jason was supposed to just drink it and that's it? You thought it would pass for an accident? I didn't think, Martha exclaimed. He just humiliated me. He rejected me as if I were worthless. And then he went back to her as if nothing had happened. They were supposed to be happy, and I was left with nothing. A police officer entered the kitchen. Detective Montgomery, we found an empty box of rat poison in the trash can in the backyard, and printouts of search queries about poisons on the computer. Lisa nodded. Martha Weiner, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Christina Weiner. You have the right to remain silent. While the detective read her rights, Martha sat motionless, like a statue. Only when the handcuffs clicked around her wrists did she suddenly stir. Wait, I need to explain to Robert, to the children. Your husband already knows, Lisa replied dryly. We spoke to him yesterday. He agreed to the wiretap. Martha looked up and saw Robert in the doorway. His face was a mask of cold hatred. You killed our daughter, he said quietly, because of some sick fantasy, because of a boy half your age. Robert, I didn't mean to. Christina shouldn't have. Shut up, he turned away. I'll take care of the children. And you, I hope you rot in prison. The detective led Martha out of the house. Neighbors had already gathered on the street, attracted by the police cars. Martha lowered her head, unable to meet their gaze. During the interrogation at the police station, she told everything. How she fell in love with Jason, how she was humiliated by his rejection, how she bought the poison and planned her revenge. There's just one thing I don't understand, said Lisa, turning off the tape recorder after the confession. If you put the poison in the thermos, why was only Christina poisoned? Jason drank the punch too. Martha shook her head. I don't know. Maybe the poison settled at the bottom, and she shook the thermos before pouring herself a drink? Lisa tapped her pen thoughtfully on the table. There's one more detail. Jason said that when he returned to the table, Christina had already taken a sip from her glass, and that she was strangely excited. She insisted on a toast, even though he suggested trying the punch first. Martha slowly raised her eyes, a flash of understanding in them. Do you think... I think Christina noticed something, Lisa said quietly. Maybe she saw the residue at the bottom of the thermos, or she tasted something strange, and she decided to protect him, Martha whispered. She drank for him. Lisa remained silent. This version would never be proven, but it explained why Jason was still alive. The trial was quick. The evidence was irrefutable, and Martha's confession made the prosecutor's job easy. She was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert filed for divorce and left Redwood Creek with the children, trying to protect them from the fallout of the scandal. Jason postponed going to college for a year, unable to cope with the trauma. 5 years later, Redwood Creek had hardly changed over the years. The same neat houses with manicured lawns, the same water tower on the horizon. Only on the outskirts of town, a new cemetery had appeared, where among other graves stood a modest monument inscribed with the words, Christina Weiner, beloved daughter and sister.